Hi, I'm more or less a simple violin fiddle player, and I know how hard it is to start out. So I thought maybe perhaps I could do lesson number 1. It might seem a tad boring, but it isn't. It'll make sense after you have lesson number 1 because it's the parts of the violin. Knowing all the names to them, and at the end of this film it'll be a picture that you can either screen shoot or something like that and save the diagram. As we go along and learn other items, knowing what the parts are very important. Otherwise it's rather difficult to give an instruction and say do this to your violin or adjust that. This and that really doesn't explain what it is. So let me first start off with the picture that you might want to screen shoot. I use a certain book. It's called Essential Elements 2000 for Strings. Simply, it's violin book number 1. And the very first section of the book, which is page number 2, is the diagram. Sorry about that movement. You notice the violin is made of different parts. The beautiful little carved section at the top of the neck, well, that's a scroll. And they call it a peg box, where the pegs actually fit in. You notice your strings fit inside of that peg box. That's why it's hollowed out and it's called a box. But the little bitty top part where the peg box comes to the fingerboard and the strings overlap where you put your fingers, it's a itty bitty little black strip. I'll show you on my violin. Let's take a peek. This little section right here. That is what is described as the nut. I call it a nut because the strings kind of wind themselves from those pegs onto the fingerboard, makes them straight onto the fingerboard. And the whole fingerboard is then glued on. The black part of that you see, well, it's glued on to that wooden piece that comes off the back of the violin. That's the neck. Your upper round section of the violin is the upper bout, and those little C's that are cut out that make it easy for you to pull your bow across the strings without hitting the wood of the violin, those are called C bouts. C bouts. The openings that are cut inside the violin, as you can see here, those are called F holes. The reason why they call them F holes is because they don't look like an F. They used to actually look like the letter C, but the French somehow decided they would make a pretty design and it let more sound out. And so it evolved into something that looked like an old way that they used to script the letter F. The part that holds the strings up is the bridge, right onto the body. That part there, it is extraordinarily important. The way it's cut, designed, everything is extremely important to the instrument because it's what sends the vibration of the strings into the violin. Beneath it, on the inside, and you don't see it, there's a tiny little post, and that post allows the vibration of the strings that vibrates down the bridge, that vibrates on to the top of the violin to reach the other side of the violin on the inside. There's a little bitty peg in there, and it will fall down if not set up right correctly, and that's okay if it does, because it normally stays in place from the tension of the strings. Nothing is glued in there, and never should be. It's called a sound post. Your tailpiece is the very end that your strings connect to. See that little piece right there? Yes, that's a tailpiece. If you notice, it has little knobs on it. The little knobs are fine tuners. So yes, you will go all the way to the top and tune it and get really close to the actual proper sound. But to get the little bit extra that you need or take a little bit away, you need a fine tuner. And of course, forgot, you gotta have a chin rest. They come in different styles, and there's a long discussion that your teacher should have with you. Each chin rest fits a person slightly different, and each person's chin is different. That's why there's so many of them. That's the style that I particularly use. And on the very back of the violin, which should never be glued to the violin, the tailpiece is held on by that little dot right there, that peg. Actually is a hole drilled in, and that peg is tapped in to hold the tailpiece on. They're actually all held together just by tension. All the pieces are set together. The reason why nothing is glued other than the main body parts, and the type of glue is very specific. It has to be a hide glue, an old-time hide glue, not Elmer's by far. It's to allow repair if ever something happens and you need to. And that particular glue allows the instrument to vibrate, and all the parts are never glued together, they're just pushed together because they all are permitted to vibrate. The glue wouldn't allow that. That's just a bit of the first portion to help you understand what makes up your violin. We'll have another lesson about the bow and how to hold the bow next. Then after that, we'll begin understanding what the strings do and how to start playing. Okay, talk to you later.